Heard every week on the amateur radio bands all around the world, broadcast on low-power AM and FM stations all across the United States, and one of the first podcasts on the Internet. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, the worldwide premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the earth as we come to air with edition number 1397 of This Week in Amateur Radio. The 2024 ARRL annual report has been released, and it promotes, protects, inspires, and educates all amateurs. A group of Cornell University students are seeking help from amateurs tracking transmissions from light-sail short-duration CubeSats. The Orlando Hamcation Award winners are announced. We will introduce you to them. The YouTube Telethon raises over $23,000 for the ARRL Teachers Institute program. The FCC closes more than 2,000 inactive proceedings. Joe Walsh, AB6 ACU from the Eagles, is getting ready to host a very special personal auction. We will have all the details. One of NASA's deep space communication dishes suffers over-rotation damage. Optical communication systems are testing the limits of FCC authority. Short-range UHF radios in Germany are facing new restrictions. The ARRL Board of Director elections are announced. We will have the results. December is Youth on the Air Month, and it has been announced that China will host the International Telecommunications Union World Radio Communication Conference 2027. And what has 5,000 batteries and floats? We will have the answer for you coming up in this week's report. These headline stories will come to you in a moment along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all of those amateur satellites in orbit. Australia's own Onno Benschop, VK6FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio will propose a few solutions when you are having problems with logging. Our own amateur radio historian, Will Rogers, K5WLR, is here with another brand new edition of A Century of Amateur Radio. This week, Will takes us all aboard the Wayback Machine to the mid-1920s as amateurs were rapidly coming to appreciate that there was something strange and unexpected about the shorter wavelengths. Clearly, it was time to press on downward, but their hands were somewhat tied by the lack of an allocation in this unused, unexplored territory. This is part one of a two-part special episode entitled Onward, Downward. And we will stop by and visit with Bill Sawyers, AJ8B in the DX Corner, with all the latest news on DXpeditions, DX, upcoming radio sport contests, and a lot more. That's all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air right now. Reporting from our headquarters studio here in snowy Albany, New York, I'm George, W2XBS.
And reporting from Sandwich, Illinois, where the outdoors is our walk-in freezer, I'm Jordan Kurtz, Kilo Echo 9, Bravo, Papa Oscar.
Reporting from our news bureau in Salem, Ohio, this is Denny Haight, NZ8D.
Reporting from our news bureau in Wisconsin, where snowflakes outnumber hams, snow is falling, the spirits are rising, and a white Christmas is only 20 days away. This is Marvin Turner, W0MET.
Coming to you from a rather nippy but still sunny Space Coast in Florida, I'm Ed Johnson, W2PH.
And reporting from our news bureau in Orland Park, Illinois, where snowy road conditions may delay my return trip to Florida, I'm Mike Nikolich, N9OVQ.
And reporting this week from amateur station K2MST inside the Museum of Science and Technology in downtown Syracuse, New York, I'm Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
And reporting from a snowy and freezing cold Troy, New York News Bureau, I'm Eric, Kilo Delta 2, Romeo, Juliet X-Ray.
And reporting from our amateur radio outpost in the Catskill Mountains of upstate New York, where it was 2 degrees this morning and 6 inches of snow on the ground. And it really is beginning to look a lot like Christmas. I'm Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
And reporting from our news bureau in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where autumn and winter are setting up for their annual prize fight, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, looking for another blanket.
Today's edition of This Week in Amateur Radio is 100% human.
The recently released ARRL 2024 annual report outlines new and strategic paths aimed at inspiring youth while building on ARRL's 5 pillars that continue to support members and amateur radio worldwide. To tell us more about the recent annual report, we go to John Ross, KD8IDJ, who files this special report from League headquarters in Newington.
Public service, advocacy, education, technology, and membership. With membership totaling over 137,000 at the end of 2024, ARRL stands as the world's largest organization of radio amateur, includes the first page of the report, which also notes that the membership retention rate has increased to 79.9%, up from 77.8% the previous year. ARRL President Rick Roderick, K5UR, in his message in the report, shares how a visit to an amateur radio club changed his life forever, providing a foundation on which to build his years of involvement and enjoyment of ham radio. In 2024, the Board of Directors decided to prioritize reaching out to the next generation to inspire them about their future in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, and how ham radio can be a part of their educational journey, said Roderick. This new third advocacy, which was unanimously approved by the Board of Directors at the July 2024 meeting, is critical to the future not only of ham radio, but also to this country's budding STEM professionals. Among the initiatives highlighted in the report are the free ARRL student membership programs launched in May of 2024 and significant growth for the ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology, which hosted a total of 85 teachers visiting from 31 states. The report also recognizes the ARRL donors contributed more than $2.1 million in 2024, fueling innovation, education, and investing in the future of amateur radio. The ARRL Diamond Club program set a record, raising over $1 million for the first time in the history of the program, which provides critical unrestricted revenues for ARRL programs above what membership dues can cover. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
The annual report contains much more detailed information, personal stories, and insight into ARRL's increased investment and prioritization to develop the next generation of radio amateurs. Take some time to read the 2024 ARRL Annual Report.
A group of students at Cornell University are seeking participation from radio amateurs who are equipped with satellite stations for help in listening for signals from a retroreflective laser sail that is scheduled to be deployed this week. The sail is currently attached to a 1U CubeSat that was launched early Tuesday, December 2, 2025, from the International Space Station, but will separate and become its own free-flying spacecraft, equipped with 4 tiny ChipSat flight computers that will transmit telemetry data back to Earth. This is the first flight of their ChipSats, and it is this data that the students seek help detecting, according to PhD candidate Joshua Umansky Castro, who has an amateur radio license call sign KD2WTQ. The Light Sails chipsats will be transmitting data using the LoRa digital protocol on 437.400 MHz with 100 milliwatts of power. The sail, stowed within the CubeSat, is expected to be released a couple of days after deployment, tentatively on Thursday, December 4th, and will likely function independently for no more than 48 hours due to the drag created by the sail. Data is being collected on the TinyGS project webpage, which is also posting updates on progress. Additional information, including LoRa parameters and links to a list of compatible receivers and the decoder file, may be found at alphacubesat.cornell.edu in the ChipSat Ground Station Guide. It is hoped that the ChipSat and Light Sail will become the trailblazer for future missions around the solar system and one day to our closest stellar neighbor, Alpha Centauri.
The FCC voted to delete about 21 rules and requirements that officials say no longer serve the public interest. The action is part of the agency's Delete docket, which seeks public input on identifying FCC rules for the purpose of alleviating unnecessary regulatory burdens. Thursday's vote deletes rule provisions and rule parts that are unnecessary because they have been sunset by operation of law or govern an expired event. This includes the suggested elimination of a rule referencing a board that has not existed in more than a decade, or another rule that was rendered moot in 2012 when FirstNet was established. In addition, the Commission proposes deletions of language governing compliance deadlines which have long since passed. The Commission says deleting these rules has no impact on the FCC's continued commitment to strengthen public safety. Chairman Brendan Carr and Commissioner Olivia Trusty voted for the action. Carr called it another step forward in the FCC's ongoing effort to eliminate unnecessary regulations. Commissioner Ana Gomez voted for some portions and dissented from the provisions that she said were not obsolete nor expired.
An international slate of hams has been recognized by the Orlando Hamcation with its 2026 awards. Tony Malozzi, MD8 RTT of Lenexa, Kansas, has been named the Gordon West Ambassador of the Year. An aviation systems engineer and former YouTube host, Malozzi was recognized for what the awards committee termed his focused long-term support and promotion of the collegiate amateur radio program, an ARRL-sponsored program established to support and promote amateur radio among students in ham radio clubs at colleges and universities. Maluzzi was one of the two co-advisors of the program, along with his brother Andy, KK4LWR, who is also an ARRL Southeastern Division Vice Director. The 2026 Carol Perry Educator of the Year Award goes to Dr. Nathaniel Frissell, W2NAF, of Springbrook, Pennsylvania. Frissell, an associate professor of physics and electrical engineering at the University of Scranton, is the founder and lead organizer of HAMSCI, the Ham Radio Science Citizen Investigation Project. HAMSCI brings together professional scientists and radio amateurs to advance scientific research and understanding through amateur radio activities, encourage the development of new technology to support this research, and provide educational opportunities for the amateur community and the general public. Hamcation's Amateur Radio Hero Award for 2026 goes to the Indian amateur Ambarish Nag Biswas, VU2 JFA, custodian of the West Bengal Radio Club. He is being honored for his outstanding support of local and national emergency operations and law enforcement during life-threatening events where lives were saved by his actions. According to the awards committee, each of these nominees has demonstrated outstanding dedication to promoting amateur radio by using radio to share knowledge, educate, and provide vital communications. The Hamcation team congratulates each of them for their award and contribution they have personally made to amateur radio. The awards will be presented at the 2026 Hamcation Awards Banquet on Saturday, February 14th, whose keynote speaker will be the ARRL Senior Director of Marketing and Innovation, Bob Inderbitson, NQ1R. Bob will speak on the Discovering Radio Communications, sharing his vision for a more active and engaged amateur radio service and how the ham radio community can inspire others to develop a deeper understanding of wireless communications. Hamcation 2026 will be held from February 13th through the 15th at the Central Florida Fairgrounds and Expo Park in Orlando. It is sponsored by the Orlando Amateur Radio Club, an ARRL-affiliated club.
The third annual YouTube telethon for the ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology was another great success. John Ross, KD8IDJ, is here with more.
With more than $23,000 raised to help cover the cost of ARRL's professional development program designed to help classroom teachers elevate their STEM programs through the use of wireless technology. That program is entirely donor-funded. The telethon ran for more than 13 hours on the Saturday after Thanksgiving on the Ham Radio Crash Course YouTube channel, led by program host Josh Nash, KI6NAZ. YouTube viewers donated $18,081 plus $570 in direct donations to ARRL and a $5,000 matching grant for a total raised of $23,651. The entire telethon may be viewed online. ARRL Director of Education and Learning Steve Goodgame, KA5ATA, said the telethon has proven to be a great collaboration between ARRL and the YouTube community to help ARRL meet funding goals to facilitate the continued growth of TI. We are thankful for our hosts like Josh, KI6NAZ, and all of the donors who helped to make this event a success, said ARRL Director of Development Kevin Beal, K8EAL. In 2025, nearly 200 teachers attended 13 TI sessions, said Good Game, noting that the teachers took knowledge and equipment back to their classrooms to elevate their STEM programs. 21 TI sessions are planned for 2026, including specialized ones on balloons and amateur radio, space communications and radio astronomy, and remote sensing and data gathering. Good Game says that ARRL is in the process of building a partnership with the SETI Institute and hopes to hold a session at its facility in California. The ARRL Teachers Institute is a major part of ARRL's third advocacy of inspiring youth, along with its advocacies of promoting and protecting amateur radio. I'm John Ross, KD8I-DJ.
Good Game added that the energy of the community to hold what has grown to be annual marathon to raise money is amazing. He also said one of the highlights of the telethon was when Nass noted that the gifted program in the school his own children attends is in needs of hands-on activities for their students, and that amateur radio is a perfect fit for learning by doing. The many donors who gave online for the telethon via YouTube and Google received an email with their tax receipt from Network for Good, which will then transfer all proceeds to ARRL. Donors can get lifetime giving credit from ARRL by forwarding that receipt to developments@arrl.org. This year, for the first time, some Teachers Institute sessions are on the road in Louisiana, Texas, New York, and Maryland, in partnership with Johns Hopkins University. While most of the 4-day sessions will be held at ARRL headquarters in Newington, Connecticut, the program will return in 2025 remote locations, as well as adding new sessions in South Carolina and the Washington, D.C. area.
Legendary Eagles guitarist Joe Walsh, WB6 ACU, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee, is getting ready for a very personal auction. The Life's Been Good Joe Walsh auction will take place December 16 and 17 at the Troubadour Club in West Hollywood, the location that helped launch some of contemporary music's most talented performers. The auction, a portion of the proceeds will support veterans, will include an exclusive exhibition of nearly 24 guitars, iconic wardrobe, and rare ham radios, including a Hammerlund HQ-145C. According to Joe, it was the first receiver that he bought after he acquired his radio license. More information about the auction can be found at Life's Been Good Joe Walsh.
For the 16th consecutive year, the 3916 Nets will be presenting the Santa Net on 3.916 megahertz. Girls and boys can talk to Santa Claus via amateur radio nightly at 7 p.m. Central, starting Friday, November 28th, the day after Thanksgiving, through Christmas Eve, December 24th. We enjoy helping young people and their families have a shared Christmas experience that they'll always remember, said Pete Thompson, KE5GGY. Christmas time is a very special time for our Nets every year, and we're thrilled to introduce young people to the excitement of amateur radio. Youngsters can talk to Santa at the North Pole via strategically placed operators who relay the voice of Santa. Thompson said that the Santa Net is a team effort that involves a number of 3916 Net members. In our first year, we connected 10 kids to Santa on ham radio, and it's grown steadily ever since. This year, we're expecting over 1,000 children to participate. Prior to each night's Santa Net, pre-net check-ins can be made at www.cqsanta.com. Third-party rules and regulations apply. The Santa Nets are presented annually by the 3916 Nets, which includes the Rag Chew Crew, the Tailgaters, and the Freewheelers. For more information on the 3916 Nets, go to www.3916nets.com. For more information on the Santa Net, email ke5ggy@gmail.com. The results of the 2025 ARRL division elections were announced on Friday, November 21st. In the ARRL Pacific Division, current director John Litz, NZ6Q, with 1,270 votes, of Stockton, California, was declared the winner, defeating Bob Vaiello, W6RGG, with 960 votes. In the Southeastern Division, current director Mickey Baker, N4MB, with 1,596 votes, of West Palm Beach, Florida, was declared the winner, defeating Tom Schaefer, NY4I, with 928 votes. Jim Vocic, K8JK, with 744 votes, and Northern Florida Section Manager Scott Roberts, KK4ECR, with 529 votes. In the Southwestern Division, current director Richard Norton, N6AA, with 1,392 votes, of Topanga, California, was declared the winner, defeating Arizona Section Manager Rick Paquette, W7RAP, with 1,388 votes. John Kitchens, NS6X, with 1,623 votes, of Somis, California, who is the Santa Barbara Section Manager, was declared the winner, defeating David Ginsburg, N3BKV, with 1,162 votes for the position of Vice Director. During August, the following incumbents and candidates were declared elected without opposition. In the Pacific Division, current Vice Director Carol Malazzo, KP4MD. In the Rocky Mountain Division, current Director Jeff Ryan, K0RM, and Mel Parks, NM7P, who ran uncontested for the position of Vice Director. In the Southeastern Division, current Vice Director Andrew Maluzzi, KK4LWR. In the West Gulf Division, Director John Robert Stratton, N5AUS, and Vice Director Lee Cooper, W5LHC, both already serving in these positions. Winners will assume their roles for terms beginning January 1st, 2026. Members voted online or could request paper ballots. The election was conducted by Third Party Election Service Corporation of Melville, New York, the same company that has conducted ARRL elections since 2022. ARRL is governed by its board of directors. Elections are held for 5 of the 15 ARRL divisions each year for terms of 3 years.
The Federal Communications Commission this week moved to terminate over 2,000 official proceedings that have become dormant and no longer serve a purpose for the American people. In particular, the FCC's Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau is seeking public comment on reasons not to terminate these dockets that have been identified by staff from around the agency as inactive or moot. Nearly 100 other dockets were closed administratively in advance of today's release. Although the FCC has moved to close dormant proceedings before, this is far and away the largest number of dormant dockets the FCC has ever sought to remove in a single proceeding, with the oldest docket teed up for termination dating back to 1991. FCC Chairman Brendan Carr issued the following statement: "The FCC is focused on delivering great and efficient results for the American people, and that requires the agency to clear out the regulatory underbrush that has built up over the years. Today, we are targeting over 2,000 open proceedings for termination. This will free up staff resources to focus on the agency's core mission and provide the regulatory certainty that allows providers to invest and build. It is time for these deadwood proceedings to go. The dormant docket workstream established by today's public notice is distinct from the agency's ongoing Delete, Delete, Delete initiative, which seeks to identify outdated and overly burdensome regulations that should be repealed. Closing dormant proceedings is a matter of good governance and helps provide the regulatory certainty needed for investments and deployments in communities across the country. In addition to the dockets listed in the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau's public notice, the Bureau is also inviting the public to identify other dockets that may no longer be relevant and should be terminated. The FCC creates formal dockets in order to categorize public comments around certain interrelated policy questions. While this is an important tool in the agency's policymaking and public engagement efforts, too often there is not a commensurate effort to close out a docket after it becomes dormant, moot, or no longer useful. The Commission is working to improve agency efficiency by removing unnecessary rules and regulations. The agency has also ended the promotion of DEI to instead focus on carrying out its statutory mission, and the FCC's outstanding staff has returned to full-time in-office work.
The Federal Communications Commission is warning broadcasters that they must maintain cybersecurity standards after a cyber breach resulted in the broadcast of obscene materials and a false emergency alert. In a November 26th memo, the FCC's Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau said that the broadcasters must ensure the security of their broadcast networks and systems. The reminder follows a string of recent cyber intrusions after threat actors gained access to improperly secured barracks equipment through a compromised studio transmitter link, the FCC said. Affected stations broadcast to the public, an attacker inserted an audio stream that includes an actual or simulated emergency alert system alert tones, as well as obscene language and other inappropriate material, the memo states. All broadcasters, especially those using barracks equipment, should take steps to secure it, the memo said, including installing software security patches when they become available, changing devices' default passwords, utilizing network firewalls when possible, monitoring equipment, and reviewing recommended best cybersecurity practices. We encourage broadcasters to contact their EAS equipment manufacturers with any specific questions regarding the security of EAS equipment, the FCC said. If you suspect that broadcast equipment has been subject to attempts at unauthorized access, we recommend you contact the equipment manufacturer and/or a data security firm, the agency added.
Here in the U.S., NASA is taking a close look at the serious damage that disabled the largest antenna at its Deep Space Network site in California 2 months ago. The 230-foot antenna, which tracks near-Earth asteroids and communicates with NASA's interplanetary spacecraft, has been out of service since September 16, 2025. The antenna suffered an excessive rotation that strained its cabling and piping and damaged its fire suppression system, which led to water damage and flooding, according to a report on the Gizmodo website. The damaged antenna, prized for its sensitivity, received its first signal in 1966 from NASA's Mariner 4 mission. In preparation for Voyager 2's mission towards Neptune, NASA upgraded the antenna's width from 210 feet, or 64 meters, to 230 feet, or 70 meters. It communicated as well with Voyager 1 in 2012, following the spacecraft's entry into interstellar space. Meanwhile, NASA relies on 2 other deep space communication antennas. They are located in Madrid, Spain, and near Canberra in Australia.
Shanghai will host the next Quadrennial Radio Communication Assembly and World Radio Communication Conference, or WRC-27, from October 11th through November 12, 2027. This marks the first time the event will be held in Asia. Every 4 years, the World Radio Communication Conference reviews and revises the International Telecommunication Union's radio regulations, the international treaty governing the use of the radio frequency spectrum, and associated satellite orbits. During the 4-week conference, ITU member states will consider the results of technical studies and adopt decisions that shape the future of spectrum for a wide range of radio communication services and applications, including mobile, satellite, radio location, radio astronomy, and space research services that support lunar communications, the ITU said. WRC-27 will be a defining moment in making universal, meaningful connectivity a reality, said ITU Secretary General Doreen Bogdan-Martin. The conference will make critical decisions about sharing spectrum and satellite orbit resources efficiently and equitably on Earth and in space, in ways that benefit all of humanity. Over 4,000 delegates are expected to attend the WRC-27 and RA-27 meetings. In addition to ITU's 194 member states, representatives from sister United Nations agencies, regional telecommunications organizations, and ITU radio communications sector members will participate as observers. As the first country in the Asia-Pacific region to host the WRC, China highly anticipates the successful convening of this grand event, said Li Licheng, Minister of Industry and Information Technology of China. We will fulfill our obligation as the host country in accordance with ITU's rules and regulations, and work together with all ITU member states to present to the world a radio communication event that fosters win-win cooperation and yields fruitful outcomes. We hereby extend a cordial invitation to all delegates to the event and wish them all a pleasant stay in Shanghai.
Hello and welcome to the DX Corner for your weekly dose of DX. I'm Bill, AJ8B. I hope you had a restful weekend and you are taking advantage of all the DX that is out there. I received the following message from Janet, W8CAA. Janet wrote, quote, I was listening to the CQ Worldwide CW contest and was confused by some of the characters that were sent. For instance, one station who was in zone 11 sent his zone number as AA instead of the numbers 11. What was he doing? Well, that's a great question, Janet. He was using something called cut numbers. In Morse code, cut numbers are a shorthand representation of numbers using fewer characters or fewer elements than the full numeric code. They were developed to speed up transmission, especially in telegraphy and amateur radio. Here's how they work. Instead of sending the full Morse code for digits, which are usually 5 elements long, operators use letters that represent the number in sound or shape. The two most common that I encounter are A for the number 1, so da instead of da, and N for the letter 9, which would be da dit versus da dit. So why use them? Well, they reduce radio transmission time. They're common in Q code signal reports and contesting. You might ask, does sending AA instead of 11 really make that much difference? Well, to me, probably not. But when a contester is logging 100 QSOs an hour for several hours, those few extra seconds per QSO can add up. So, that is what you were hearing. Thank you for the question. If you have a question, please email me at thedxmentor@gmail.com. If I can't answer it, I know people that can. The following DX information comes from Bernie, W3UR, editor of the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the How's DX column in QST. If you would like a free 2-week trial of the Daily DX, your only source of real-time DX information, just drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com. Well, here's an update on one I was waiting for, Alpha 52 Alpha Alpha Bhutan. Quote, against all hopes, propagation took a nosedive earlier this week, effectively wiping out the bands completely. Not a single QSO has been possible since then. Amateur radio was to have been the sole activity of this trip with no sightseeing time at all. But with the situation being what it is, instead of sitting here twiddling my thumbs, I've decided to switch the focus of this trip to sightseeing. And I imagine being in Bhutan, sightseeing would be amazing. This would mean calling off the Alpha 52 Alpha Alpha effort prematurely. I apologize to all hams who are looking forward to adding A5 Bhutan to their logbooks. I'm sorry to have had to make this difficult decision, but there were no other options open to me. Unfortunately, that's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. Till next time, 7-3 from Alpha 52 Alpha Alpha. You know, from time to time, I'll mention the challenge of insects and bugs and snakes and spiders and foreign governments and soldiers and weather, and then here's another one. Sunspots completely wiped out the band, and he was high and dry. Tango Golf, Guatemala. Tango Golf 9 stroke Alpha 4 Charlie Alpha Fox 4 Charlie Zulu will be on the air holiday style December 7th to January 5th, mostly FT8, FT4 on 40 through 10 meters. He will upload his log to LOTW, EQSL, and Club Log. So if you need Guatemala, that's a good one. Charlie 5, the Gambia. Andre, Oscar November 7 Yankee Kilo, is once again active as Charlie 5 Yankee Kilo from Bahio in the Gambia. Listen for him on all modes on 20, 17, 15, 12, and 10 meters. And you can QSL his C5 operation to Oscar November 7 Yankee Kilo. From Botswana Alpha 2, we find Ben, Delta Bravo 2 Lima Sierra, is back in Botswana for about 10 days. He'll be on as Alpha 25 Lima Sierra on FT8 during daytime and may operate single sideband and CW during his nights. From Panama, Hotel Papa, we find Oscar Kilo 2 Whiskey X-Ray as Hotel Papa 3 Oscar Kilo 2 Whiskey X-Ray QRV during the 160-meter contest. He and HP3 stroke Oscar Kilo 2 Yankee Lima will be there until December 10. Activity will be holiday style on CW and sideband with an emphasis on the low bands. QSL those operations via Italy 8 Kilo Hotel Charlie. From Sierra Leone, 9 Lima, we have Stephen, Gulf 7 Boston Uniform X-Ray who arrived in Freetown, Sierra Leone on November 24th and is QRV until December 10th. He will be operating his 9 Lima 1 Boston Tango uniform with an IC 7300 and a G5 RV antenna. He is experiencing significant QRM on the low bands with occasional electrical blackouts. He hopes to install a solar power system during his trip and will operate holiday style when he has time. And you can QSL the Sierra Leone via his home call, which is Golf 7 Baker X-ray uniform. Charlie Nancy, Morocco. From December 11th to the 14th, the special call sign of Charlie November 25, Juliet India Mike, will be used to mark International Mountain Day, which falls on December 11th. This year also aligns with the UN's International Year for the Preservation of Glaciers, emphasizing glacier protection and the water supply. The occasion will feature both online and local events, including webinars and celebrations. Victor Kilo, Australia. This would be a good one to get the kids and the grandkids around the radio for. From now until December 24th, Victor Kilo 2, Sierra Alpha November Tango Alpha, which is VK2 Santa, will be on the air, allowing children and others to talk to the North Pole on various radio frequencies. Updated times and frequencies are available online by checking out QRZ.com and searching on Victor Kilo 2 Santa. Derek, Tango Lima 8 Golf Delta stroke Tango Juliet 1 Golf Delta. Quote, the next stage of my journey leads to Chad, where I will operate as Tango Tango 1 Golf Delta for approximately 3 weeks starting on December 1st. Radio activity will be in my free time as the primary purpose of this trip is pastoral and missionary support. You will be able to work Tango Tango 1 Golf Delta as soon as I arrive and get the station on the air. Thank you for your support, patience, and for following this journey across Central Africa. See you on the bands. You know, the TT used to be called the Terrible T's, Tango Lima, Tango Juliet, and Chad, Tango Tango. We have Tango 8 from Palau. Juliet Alpha 1 Alpha Delta Tango plans to be active from Palau as Tango 88 Alpha Charlie until December 17th. Participation in the ARRL 10-meter contest is going to be attempted. His focus, however, will be on the low bands before and after the contest. QSL via LOTW. Paper QSLs will be available if needed. Send with enough return postage, which is typically $3 or $4 or more. Well, here's one of the terrible T's, Benin Tango Yankee. Red, Delta Lima 1, Boston Uniform Golf will again be active from Cotonou, Benin, is Tango Yankee 5 Fox Radio until December 11th. He will be QRV on 80 through 10 meters, including 60 meters, Joe. CW and sideband using an IC 7300 and a G5 RV antenna. Participation in the CQ Worldwide DXCW contest, which was last weekend, will also be attempted. And you can QSL Bud via his home call, Delta Lima 1, Bravo Uniform Golf. Senegal, 6 Whiskey. Michael, Delta Oscar 5 Radio Quebec, will be active holiday style from Senegal as 6 Whiskey stroke Delta Oscar 5 Radio Quebec from December 4th to the 14th. He will try daily 1000 to 1800 UCC on the air between 10 meters and 40 meters sideband only using a 40 meter long high-end fed half-wave 100-watt antenna, possibly an activation of one of the POTUS stroke WWFF parks nearby to the QTH. QSL information is not yet clear, and the 6 Whiskey licenses are very fresh in obtaining shortly before travel to Senegal, and as soon as we get the QSL information, you'll get it here. The DX Mentor features a new podcast episode this coming weekend, a discussion with Joe, W8GEX, offering tips and hints for DXers to get more into the logbook. Between Joe and the host, AJ8B, they have almost 100 years of chasing DX. Check it out and let me know what you think. If you want to follow all of the latest DX podcasts and YouTube releases, you should check out the DX Mentor Facebook page and subscribe to be kept up to date on all of the DX activities. So finally, I have a contest update. I know that the ARRL contest sheet is read elsewhere in this podcast, and the contests that I mention are sometimes redundant. However, there are a few contests that I have found to be especially useful for DXers who are trying to fill band slots or work all-time new ones. The next big contest on the horizon is the ARRL 10-meter contest. The objective of this contest is for amateurs worldwide to exchange QSO information with as many stations as possible on the 10-meter band. The dates are the second full weekend of December, the 13th and 14th, starting at 0 UTC Saturday, which In the east would be 7 p.m. Friday night, and continuing through 23:59 UTC Sunday, which would be 6:59 in the evening. Let me know if you participate in this contest and how you do. And to be quite honest, 3 or 4 years from now, this contest will be very difficult to work because sunspots aren't going to be there. Until next week, this is Bill, AJB saying 7-3, and thanks to my XYL Karen for her love and support. I hope to hear you in the pileups. Have a great DX week.
Welcome to the 48th segment of Ham Radio History, a century of amateur radio. Ham's Organizations, Events, Inventions. I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR. Our appreciation goes out to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for permitting us to use his website as we prepare these segments. Now come along with us as we set forth this next chapter of ham radio history. Onward, downward. Around 1 a.m. on 26 November 1923, Charles York had been handling routine message traffic at his station 7HG in Tacoma, Washington, when he heard a pure CW station calling him on 200 meters, signing JUPU. They made contact easily at first. The JUPU operator, an American, gave him a message for his mother in Cambridge, Illinois, and said he was located in Tokyo. But the contact was lost before York could get the street address in Cambridge, find out exactly who the JUPU operator was, or whether the station was aboard a ship or on land. Most of this would remain a mystery except that the station itself was later found to be government-owned, and was also heard by at least one other amateur. The contact itself was never confirmed, though no one questioned that it had occurred. York made the QSO running 100 watts to a 6-wire inverted L antenna with a 50-foot top section and a 40-foot lead-in wire. An accomplished DXer, he had previously worked both 6 CEU in Hawaii and 1 AC in Nova Scotia. This, however, was the first two-way QSO across the Pacific Ocean, about 4,650 miles, and it was done entirely without preparation, prearranged schedule, or fanfare, and, as he put it, where the mere existence of stations capable of doing the job was not suspected. Amateurs were rapidly coming to appreciate that there was something strange and unexpected about the shorter wavelengths. Clearly it was time to press on downward, but their hands were somewhat tied by the lack of an allocation in this unused, unexplored territory. Operating there still required a special permit from the Department of Commerce. Hams had been relegated to 200 meters or lower in 1912 because the short wavelengths were considered useless. Now, as amateurs were opening up this new frontier, they were being prevented from developing it. Getting an X license, as the special permits were called, to operate there was also becoming more difficult than in the old days. And yet, it was the amateurs who were making transatlantic contacts on 100 meters seem routine, and who were being heard on every continent. Who better than the amateurs could develop the short waves? The situation was frustrating. Besides the vicinity of 100 meters, wouldn't it be fascinating to have an amateur band from 40 to 50 meters, or even from 4 to 5 meters, where we'd have to develop totally new methods and brand new apparatus to make them work, pondered ARRL Secretary Warner. He blamed the reservation below 150 meters squarely on commercial interests, the broadcasters on 100 meters in particular. Most believed that when new regulation eventually arrived, amateurs should rightly be given access to some of the short waves. Meanwhile, intercontinental experiments continued. In early 1924, Charles D. McClurkin's station, 2CM near Sydney, Australia, was copied at 4AA in New Zealand, 1,500 miles away. Amazingly, 2CM was transmitting with only 4 milliwatts of power. McClurkin had been conducting tests specifically to probe the boundaries of low-power operation by gradually decreasing his transmitter power in steps, each indicated by sending single-letter codes. His experiments and successes in being heard over long distances with low power on short wave made him one of the most well-known Australian amateurs, inspiring others to follow. Long intrigued by hunting for and hearing American stations coming through down under, McClurkin decided to take his experiments to the U.S., quite literally. Later that spring, he recruited another Australian amateur prominent in low-power shortwave DX, 16-year-old Jack Davis, 2DS, to help take his station to sea. They intended to experience communicating with home using low-power shortwaves at ever greater distance as they crossed the Pacific Ocean from Sydney to San Francisco. Back in Australia, F. Basil Cook, Vice President of the Australian Radio Relay League, was appointed to organize participation in these tests, including the operation at 2CM, McClurkin's home station. Signing 2CDM, a duplicate of the 2CM station was built and installed in a 5-foot square cabin lashed to the afterdeck of the RMS Tahiti, the ship that would take them to the U.S. and back again. On the way, they planned to operate on 240, 200, and perhaps 160 meters from 10 March to 7 April between 2 and 4:30 a.m. Pacific Time. The two were anxious to see how far out they could still communicate with home and at what point they would begin to work the U.S. West Coast. Before heading north, the Tahiti sailed for 5 days east to Wellington, New Zealand, where McClurkin and Davis met local hams with whom they'd often corresponded. The Australians also had to hunt for a high-voltage generator to replace theirs, which had burned out after only 3 days in operation. They had bad luck with their 5-watt transmitting tubes, too. Having planned to use 3 of them, their primary tubes all died shortly after leaving home, and one of the 2 spares was found to be a dud. That left them with only a single transmitting tube for the entire Pacific crossing. Pressing on, nevertheless, the 2 hams maintained good contact with amateurs in Australia and New Zealand out to 1,800 miles. Soon they established contact with 6 AKW on the California coast, with whom they continued to converse for the rest of the trip, and on broadcast wavelengths, KGO in Oakland and KHJ in Los Angeles brought music on board the Tahiti. Although two-way communication with home gradually became impossible, they continued to copy signals from 2CM in Sydney nearly the entire distance until at 5,380 miles out and nearing the U.S. West Coast, the QRM from American Signals finally drowned it out. McClurkin was certain that if it were not for the QRM, he'd have easily been able to copy 2CM all the way to San Francisco Bay. A.H. Babcock, ARRL director in Berkeley, hosted a hamfest at the Engineers Club attended by other prominent Bay Area amateurs. Here they exchanged ideas about operating techniques and radio technology and told one another about amateur radio in their respective countries. McClurkin and Davis remarked that useless calling and not enough listening were the greatest hindrances to effective communication, echoing similar complaints in North America. We'll continue this segment next week. Included in this material are quotes from the following: Direct Contact with Japan, QST, February 1924, page 14. Untitled Note in QST, May 1925, page 40. Who is JUPU? International Amateur Radio, QST, April 1924, page 45. The Shortwaves Editorial, QST, March 1924, page 7. F.B. Cook, An Amazing World Record, QST, February 1924, page 18. F. Basil Cook, Australian Amateur Radio Puts to Sea, QST, February 1924, page 30. H. F. Mason, The Eastward Voyage of the Tahiti, QST, May 1924, page 21. International Amateur Radio, QST, April 1924, page 45. F. H. Schnell, The Pan American Test, QST, May 1924, page 27. With a tip of the TWIAR cap to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for allowing us to use his website, Ham Radio History, A Century of Amateur Radio. Ham's organizations, events, inventions in the preparation of this segment. I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, reporting for This Week in Amateur Radio.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. The first step in solving any problem is recognizing that there is one. In my case, the name of that problem is logging, specifically the storage and collection of my amateur radio contact logs. Just to be clear, the actual process of logging is fraught. What do you log, as in which pieces of information are germane to the purpose of logging. Do you log your own call sign, or do you only collect that once per session? Do you log in UTC or in local time? If you're logging in local time, do you record where you're logging? Do you record what power level, which antenna, what radio, the battery voltage? You get the idea. Then there's when do you log? Do you log each and every session on air, weekly nets, chat sessions on the local repeater? Do you log the time when you establish the contact, once you've deciphered their call sign, or once the contact ends? And if you never wear a watch, how do you know what time it is? What do you log with? Is it using pen and paper, pencil and paper, on a sheet of A4 or A5, in a binder, in a scrapbook, in an exercise book, in a journal, a diary, on ruled, grid, or on plain paper? Or do you log with a computer? And if you do that, using which of the 7 gazillion logging packages that are available to you? I'm not talking about any of those things, though I suppose you could argue that I'm addressing one of the gazillion options, but stick with me. I have, sitting on my desk, 14 different logbooks. That's not unreasonable, almost one for each year that I've been licensed, except that these books are not in any way consistent. They're essentially bound pieces of scrap paper with log entries scribbled in the available space. Sometimes I reversed a spiral notebook just so I can avoid the spiral with my writing hand. Sometimes it's oriented in landscape, other times in portrait. Some are smaller than A5, others are foolscap and intended for accounting purposes. Next to that pile are too many empty logbooks, intended for future use. Why so many, you ask? Well, it goes like this. You go to the office supply store to look for a suitable logbook. You buy it and try it. You use it for a bit and decide that you either love or hate it. If you hate it, you go back to the store to try and find another one. If you love it, your problem becomes finding an identical logbook. In a fit of inspiration, I loved the grid layout of my tiny spiral notebooks and decided that this was the one for me. But they're no longer available. So instead I bought 20 A4 7mm grid exercise books with a soft cover, which I hate, and that was after trying to get a third account book journal with a hard cover. There's also several A5 spiral-bound books, but they're too chunky for portable operation, and their spiral is annoying for logging. There's also various empty ring binders and paper ready for logging in the garage. Who knew that there are apparently multiple disconnected universes where so-called universal loose-leaf hole-punched paper doesn't fit ring binders with more than 2 rings? I suppose that's like different implementations of the same version of ADIF, but I'll admit that I'm bitter, and I have digressed well off topic. I will say this, stationery and I clearly have an unhealed relationship. That's not the half of it. My computer has at least 208 ADIF and Cabrillo files on it. I say at least since that's the ones I found when looking for ADI, ADIF and CAB files. Removing identical files nets me 171 text files, which I'm pretty sure are all log files, 50,000 lines, but that's with some having a 1 line per contact and others having a dozen, depending on which software wrote the file. It's going to take a moment since those 208 files are scattered among 74 different directories. Then there's the files that WSJTX and FLDigi create. But right now I'm not sure what the extensions for those are. I think one is called all.txt, and looking inside it helpfully does not have a year in the log data. So that's fun. My computer also has logs in CQRlog, Xlog and VKCL, probably others. Then there's the logs I have online. The log for F-Troop is a single spreadsheet. It has nearly 10,000 entries. I know that there's other files online and likely in other places, like the various clubs I've operated at. Fortunately or not, most of those were done with the club call sign, so I'm calling those out of scope, at least for now. Then there's the entries in LOTW, Clublog, EQSL, probably QRZ and likely more. It all started out so innocently. I made my first contact in 2011 and forgot to log it. Since then, I've been extolling the virtues of making sure that everyone around me logs their first contact. Meanwhile, I've been pulling my hair out trying to make sense of the fragmented disaster that is represented by logging in amateur radio. I'll take responsibility for my own mess, but I have to point the finger at my predecessors who still cannot agree on what to log, and how to store or convert it, despite a century of logging. It's not for the want of trying. It's that the nature of logging in this hobby is less than consistent, to say the least. Each contest wants their log in some special format. Logging tools pick their own format that's incompatible with that of another tool. If you're lucky, that incompatibility is obvious, but more likely than not, it's subtle. Among all those sources of log entries that I've mentioned are undoubtedly going to be duplicate contacts. There's going to be incorrect transcriptions, inaccurate record keeping, wrong times, missing years, and all the other things that come to mind when you describe a data entry problem. Fortunately, I have some experience with data entry. It was the transcribing of a recent POTA or Parks on the Air log that triggered an insight for me. Faced with the reality of entering contacts into something electronic, based on a bound notebook with log entries scribbled all over it, basically a pretty piece of scrap paper, I needed to solve a specific problem, namely the fact that I was entering this data for another amateur, who would be uploading it into the relevant POTA system. I had no idea what the field requirements were, didn't know where they'd be uploaded to, nor what format they needed. So I improvised, figuring that getting both the logged and inferred data into some table would be a good start. So I used a spreadsheet. After completing the task, I had my epiphany. What if I logged all my contacts in a spreadsheet? I can sort it by whichever column I want. I can have as many columns as I need, a squillion rows if I make that many contacts. I can convert it to whatever format the next contest manager desires, and I can back it up like any other spreadsheet. Better still, it's software agnostic. If I suddenly discover the next best logging tool since toasted sliced bread with creamed honey, I can convert my sheet into something that's required. Better yet, I can extract the data from that tool and put it back into the spreadsheet after discovering the author has a propensity of making random changes that are incompatible with my worldview. So, spreadsheet. Oh yeah, I won't be using Excel. It has a, let's call it, nasty habit of converting anything that remotely resembles a date into one, even when you don't want it to. Clippy lives on, apparently. I'll likely photograph each page, and to keep track of which logs I've entered, I'll put a coloured dot on a page when I've entered it into my spreadsheet. Once a logbook is entered, I'll mark it in some way too. Then I'll have to massage the existing electronic data. I can't wait. How have you solved your contact logging problem? I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima, Alpha Bravo.
The Radio Society of Great Britain is looking for a proactive and knowledgeable volunteer to serve as its new accessibility champion. This important role will focus on ensuring that people with disabilities can fully participate and enjoy everything that amateur radio has to offer. Key responsibilities include engaging with the amateur radio community, serving as a point of contact, and signposting people to resources that can help them, as well as raising awareness of the challenges faced by individuals and sharing inspiring stories. If you have a strong understanding of accessibility issues, ideally with personal experience or professional expertise, and are passionate about inclusion within amateur radio, the Society would love to hear from you. If you are interested in finding out more, including having a chat about the role, first read the full role description, then contact RSGB Board Director Nathan Nuttall, 2M0OCC.
Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here now with this week's AMSAT report. Bruce?
Thanks, John. AMSAT software engineer Hamir, licensed as W1ANT and TF3ANT, brought up an interesting concept for sending command and control information to the Gulf satellites at the AMSAT Symposium earlier this year. He noted that the current method called AMCOM has been used since 2015, and a more robust method is needed. Instead of sending data in CSV format, he suggested sending in a JavaScript object notation, or JSON. This format can be more easily read by humans. Hamir suggested modifying the structure to include multi-part commands. These packets would have a sequential numbering system to keep track of them. Specific bits would indicate whether a command was multi-part or not, and if the command was acknowledged or is missing. Hamir elaborated on the technical elements of the transmission protocol, detailing how to manage packet loss and potential sequence issues via a robust acknowledgement system. The system would require 2 threads of execution by the ground station, one sending commands and the other handling incoming telemetry. This dual threading is crucial as it allows for more efficient communications and processing, maintaining system integrity in the event of packet loss or transmission delays. As always, there is a concern for security. All command and control transmissions are encrypted to the satellite. Transmissions from the satellite are not encrypted as it is against FCC rules. This is Bruce Page, KK5DO. Back to you, John.
And thanks, Bruce, for that report.
It is time for this week's look at upcoming solar weather and the terrestrial propagation forecast. Solar activity was at low levels this past week with only C-class flares. Region 4294 remains the largest region on the disk, but is appearing to be simplifying magnetically. Region 4296, on the other hand, gained a delta region in its intermediary region, though no corresponding increase in flare activity as of yet. New flux emerged along the eastern side of Region 4298, resulting in C-class flares throughout the reporting period. Region 4299 also developed a delta region in its primary spot, but no appreciable shear was observed. A new region, 4301, developed, was numbered, but was otherwise unremarkable. No Earth-directed coronal mass ejections were observed in available coronagraph imagery. Isolated to occasional M-class flares are expected through December 6th, with a chance for X-class flares, given past flare history, and the potential of current active regions on the disk. The solar wind environment is anticipated to remain more turbulent into the early hours of December 4th due to the continued passage of an entangled coronal mass ejection. The environment will likely remain enhanced due to the fast solar wind conditions through December 6th. For more information concerning radio propagation, visit the ARRL Technical Information Service. Read A Guide to HF Propagation Using Solar Indices, and check out the propagation forecast page of Karl Wetzelschwab K9LA. For customizable propagation charts, visit the VOCAP Online for Ham Radio website.
Just ahead in radio sports this week, December 5th, the NCCC FT Fort Sprint Digital. The weekly RTTY test, that is digital. December 5th through the 7th, the ARRL 160-meter contest, that is CW. December 5th as well, the NCCC Sprint, CW. December 6th and 7th, the CalBar contest, that's phone. And on December 6th as well, the Wake Up QRP Sprint, that is CW. Remember to visit the ARRL contest calendar for more events and information. Upcoming section, state, and division conventions, December 12th to the 13th, the Tampa Bay Hamfest hosting the ARRL West Central Florida Section Convention. That's in Plant City, Florida. And on January 10th, Ham Radio University hosting the ARRL New York City, Long Island Section Convention. That's in Brookville, New York. And again, remember to search the ARRL Hamfest calendar and convention database to find events in your area.
We are at the beginning of a brand new month, so that means it is time for a look at this month's Volunteer Monitor Program Report. The Volunteer Monitor Program is a joint initiative between the ARRL and the FCC to enhance compliance in the amateur radio service. This is the most recent report from the VM program. General class operators in Texas, Colorado, and New Jersey were issued advisories for a single sideband operation on 14.220 MHz, which is not authorized for general class operators. Technician operators in Utah, Pennsylvania, Georgia, California, and Colorado were issued advisories concerning 20-meter FT8 operation, a band on which technicians have no privileges. Technician operators in California and Colorado received advisories concerning FT8 operation on 40 meters. Technicians have only CW privileges on this band. A commendation was issued to an operator in St. Petersburg, Florida for exceptional courtesy during communications on 20 meters. The operator was net control for a net due to begin, but asked permission from ongoing Parks on the Air communications to start the net. The POTA group volunteered to move up the band, and interference was avoided. There were 2 virtual club presentations about the Volunteer Monitor program, one with the Palo Alto Amateur Radio Association and another with the South Orange Amateur Radio Association, both in California. There was one FCC request for monitoring assistance in a southwestern state. The totals for this report's monitoring were 1,778 hours on HF frequencies and 2,190 hours on VHF frequencies and above, for a total of 3,968 hours. We thank Volunteer Monitor Program Administrator Riley Hollingsworth, K4ZDH, for this report.
In case you missed Pacificon 2025 in mid-October, an online photo album is now available. There were around 1,500 attendees at the 3-day event held annually in San Ramon, California, and which hosted the ARRL Pacific Division Convention. There were forums, seminars, vendors, exhibits, license testing, and more. The convention photographers were Pete Harris, KE6ZIW, and Barry Ikas, K6ZA, who have just released an album of 260 pictures. And you can find a link to that picture album at ARRL.org. And by the way, next year's Pacificon is October 16th through the 18th, 2026.
The ARRL VEC has processed most of the backlog of 2,500-plus license applications that could not be filed with the FCC during the recent federal government shutdown. Intermittent outages across several FCC systems, including CORS, which is used for payment, may delay processing of new, upgraded, and renewal license applications, as well as individual and club filings. Some FCC search pages may display access denied or timeout. Please be patient and try again as the FCC works to resolve these issues. Candidates who still need an FCC registration number, or FRN, should continue to visit the CORS website.
During the entire month of December, many young hams around the world will be active with YOTA, or Youth on the Air, as the suffix in their call sign. In the U.S., look for one-by-one special event calls and regular call signs. Many of these young hams are encouraging other youths to be active on the amateur radio bands. Some will give demonstrations at their schools, introducing ham radio to friends while making QSOs or enjoying a great pile-up. Licensed and unlicensed youth, with the help of a licensed operator, will be making QSOs. Everyone is reminded that this could be the first radio contact ever for some newcomers. Help fill their logbooks. Use this direct link to the DX cluster, already filtered, to spot active stations during December YOTA month. DYM Stations 2025, hosted by DXSummit.fi.
On December 2nd, 2025, the FCC released an order extending the dates for comments on a notice of proposed rulemaking that seeks comments on the ways the Commission can facilitate a successful transition to all Internet Protocol interconnection for voice services to improve access to public safety, consumer protection, and competition. For instance, Next Generation 911 depends on an IP-based backbone to support multimedia inputs like text, video, and data, and to improve call delivery and emergency response times, the availability of location information, and real-time call routing flexibility. The FCC proposes not to enforce by December 31, 2028, certain interconnection obligations which require covered voice service providers to maintain legacy time division multiplexing technology. As to accessibility, the FCC seeks comment on the following: whether the December 31, 2028 timeframe is feasible for seamless accessibility-related transitions, to what extent would a transition to an all-IP infrastructure affect accessibility for people with disabilities, are there still devices or services such as TTY or speech-to-speech services that require TDM technology, and can the FCC use its authority pursuant to the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act to require this transition in order to ensure disability access to IP-based emergency services? Interested parties may file comments by accessing the FCC's electronic comment filing system. All filings must reference WC docket numbers 25-304, 25-208, and 17-97. People with disabilities who need assistance to file comments online may request assistance by email to fcc504@fcc.gov.
The ARRL and Radio Relay International, or RRI, are encouraging radio amateurs to originate a holiday radiogram to friends and family members this year. The tradition of sending a Christmas radiogram should have a nostalgic feel that fits the holiday season well, wrote Radio Relay International Chairman James Wades, WB8SIW, in the December edition of the National Traffic System Letter, a monthly newsletter of ARRL's National Traffic System. Furthermore, added Wades, the delivery of a radiogram serves as a great public relations opportunity. RRI works closely with the NTS. If one hasn't originated a radiogram before, Wades continued, there are some convenient tools, one of which is available from RRI and the other of which is available on an online radiogram portal developed by K1RFD for the ARRL NTS2 committee. Both methods allow people who have never sent a radiogram in their lives to originate a message to family or friends. Wades encourages message originators to please make sure you have the correct up-to-date address information for the recipient, including both a phone number and email address, and to limit message text to 25 words or less. You may use the ARRL numbered radiogram text ARRL 61 wishing you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, or ARRL 62 season's greetings and best wishes to you for a pleasant holiday season. A couple of related notes for traffic handlers. ARRL and Radio Relay International have developed a Christmas season radiogram form for delivery of messages. In addition, the December NTS letter reports on updates of HX handling instructions, including 2 new instructions and changes to others. See the issue for details. The NTS letter is a monthly online newsletter for participants in ARRL's National Traffic System, a network of message handling nets that date to the League's earliest days. It is available free to all ARRL members.
The Amateur Radio Society of Norfolk, Virginia, known by the acronym RASON, has been awarded a $12,000 Mobile Communications America Day grant to advance education in radio frequency spectrum technologies. The grant positions Racing among 12 organizations nationally recognized for their commitment to innovation and community service in communications technology. I am extremely proud of progress and willingness of our volunteer radio operators to help each other serve our community, said Raisin President Rich Davis, W4NMH. Raisin collaborates with key partners including the Skywarn Amateur Radio Network, supported by the National Weather Service, the ARRL Amateur Radio Emergency Services, and ARRL Field Service programs to ensure reliable emergency communications.
The Ham Radio Science Citizen Investigation, or HAM-SCI, is seeking operators and monitors to participate in a series of upcoming meteor scatter experiments. Operations will take place on December 12th and 13th over a 48-hour period during the Geminids meteor shower. This is a combination special event and a contest to generate contact data during meteor scatter events using 10 meters on 28.145 megahertz and 6 meters at 50.260 megahertz. Suggested operating procedures can be found at www.hamsci.org/MSQP. No special station equipment is required, but the experiment uses the MSK-144 operating mode as part of the WSJ-TX suite. The functionality is much like using FT8 and is easy to use. For more information on the operating guidelines for the activity, visit hamsci.org/MSQP-rules.
In Germany, amateur radio may get an unintended boost following major restrictions that the nation's regulator has placed on the use of private mobile short-range handheld radios known as PMR 446. PMR 446, the popular short-range UHF radios enjoyed in much of Europe, could be enjoyed much less in Germany this month after changes enacted by the regulator BNetzA. The regulator will prohibit operators from using any external antennas with their radios and from using the radios as base stations. PMR operators will also use the ability to use their radios as repeaters or as Internet gateways, two functions widely available to amateur radio operators. The PMR radios, which operate on 16 frequencies within the 446 MHz band, will only be permitted to be used for so-called peer-to-peer or person-to-person mode. Explaining these changes on his YouTube channel Funkwelle, the German word for radio waves, Art Konze, DL2ART, told viewers that he expected PMR operating to drop off by saying the only alternative that remains is to get into amateur radio. He went on to say that holders of the new N-Class entry-level license have the ability to use relays and Internet gateways and can communicate worldwide. Art reminded viewers that these changes closely follow similar restrictions placed earlier this year on Freenet, Germany's license-free personal mobile two-way radio service.
As the U.S. regulator of non-federal radio spectrum, the FCC has become one of the most important overseers of commercial space activity. No satellite system can realistically gain access to the U.S. market without prior FCC approval and oversight. The agency licenses space and Earth stations and coordinates U.S. filings with the International Telecommunications Union. But optical communication systems, particularly optical ground stations, do not fit neatly within the FCC's statutory authority to regulate communications by wire or radio. Optical transmissions are not radio. Rather, free space optical communications, or laser communications, use optical wavelengths, generally in the near-infrared portion of the spectrum, to transmit data between user terminals. Traditionally, satellite communication systems have relied on radio frequency transmissions within designated spectrum bands to relay signals either between satellites or from satellites to Earth. While these systems remain reliable and widely used, RF spectrum has inherent limitations, most notably finite bandwidth, increasing congestion, and atmospheric attenuation. Optical communications offer a different path. By transmitting optical wavelengths, typically in the near-infrared range, free space optical links can provide much higher data rates than RF. One key component is the optical ground station. Unlike a traditional RF ground station with a dish antenna, an optical ground station uses a telescope and optoelectric components to transmit and receive laser signals. Still, LaserComm possesses unique technical challenges. The same narrow beam that enhances security also imposes constraints. RF signals can blanket wide areas. Atmospheric attenuation also remains a major challenge to laser communications. Atmospheric attenuations such as dust, smoke, fog, haze, and inclement weather impair the technology's ability to transmit information. The FCC has long indicated that it does not have jurisdiction over optical intersatellite links because they do not involve RF spectrum. If the FCC lacks authority over LaserComm, it might be unable to apply licensing requirements, enforce technical standards, or impose other space access conditions such as orbital debris mitigation plans and post-mission disposal requirements. Uncertainty also carries real risks. Operators do not know whether FCC licensing will eventually be required, what conditions might apply, or whether or how the U.S. might ultimately coordinate internationally. Lack of clarity could also complicate global harmonization. Other jurisdictions may set their own rules, creating inconsistent standards.
The University of California in Davis will fly its RealOpt-2U CubeSat mission with two goals in mind. The primary goal of the mission will be to provide students with the educational opportunity to design, build, and test a satellite. Students will gain hands-on knowledge of the different subsystems of the satellite, and they will learn about the use of amateur radio and how to use RF in order to communicate with spacecraft. The secondary goal of the mission is to demonstrate the feasibility of using hard disk drives as a low-cost alternative to reaction wheels for CubeSat attitude detection and control. This has the potential to reduce the financial barrier of entry into CubeSat development. A UHF GMSK downlink with a 96 kHz symbol rate on 437.400 MHz is proposed. Telemetry packets will use HDLC framing and a rate with 1/2 convolutional forward error correction. Deployment from the space station is planned for June 2026.
First off, ARRL is excited to premiere a new video all about amateur radio on the International Space Station. Thanks to Nicole Ayers, KJ5GWI, who recorded this during her time on the International Space Station. Join them on Tuesday, December 2nd at 1800 UTC for the big reveal. The feed will be available on YouTube. And finally, are you looking to kick back over the holidays and build and fly your own rockets? Well-reviewed space flight simulators are available for your Android and iOS phones. A free app named Space Flight Simulator by Team Curiosity can be found at the Google Play and Apple App Stores. You can build any rocket you like from available parts and explore the planets in our solar system as you wish.
Scientists at the University of Southampton have confirmed what they consider to be an unmistakable cause and effect relationship between radio emissions and sudden auroral eruptions. The international team's findings, called unprecedented by the scientific community, have been published in the journal Nature Communications. The researchers speculate that this will alter the means by which space weather is forecast. According to published reports, the use of the advanced ground-based observatories made it possible for researchers to detect and identify signature patterns of low-frequency radio emissions in the magnetosphere, which are immediately succeeded repeatedly by auroral explosion. This discovery provides a missing piece for physicists, who until now were never certain of the immediate trigger behind the violent energy release that expresses itself as the northern and southern lights.
Simulations indicate that the decay of our satellite Hades-R, or SO-124, is approaching and will likely occur during the first 2 weeks of January 2026. If you can, take the opportunity to make use of this satellite, which has been working very well and has brought much joy to radio amateurs around the world. Any old FM equipment will work since the repeater is level activated and does not require a subtone. The frequencies and operating modes are 145.925 MHz uplink on FM voice with no subtone, and FSK 200 BPS, AFSK AX.25, APRS 1200 or 2400 BPS. 436.888 MHz downlink on FM voice, CW FSK 200 to 2400 BPS.
Having a disability of any kind should not keep an amateur radio operator or would-be amateur off the air. Recognizing this, the Radio Society of Great Britain is seeking someone to fill a new volunteer role as accessibility champion. The best candidate will raise public awareness of challenges for radio operators with disabilities while connecting those amateurs with community groups, assistive technologies, and other resources. The RSGB's move comes just a few weeks after the International Amateur Radio Union Region 1 announced an upcoming activity by its program for disabled radio amateurs. Organizers have declared a region-wide campaign on December 3rd in connection with the United Nations International Day of Persons with Disabilities. Hams have been encouraged to host a special event station, an open house, or a relevant educational forum. Meanwhile, the RSGB is interested in hearing from candidates to fill this post. A description of the role can be found on the Society's website, rsgb.org. The contact person is Board Director Nathan Newtall, 2M0OCC.
During the entire month of December, many young hams around the world will be active with YOTA, or Youth on the Air, as the suffix in their call sign. In the U.S., look for one-by-one special event calls and regular call signs. Many of these young hams are encouraging other youths to be active on the amateur radio bands. Some will give demonstrations at their schools, introducing ham radio to friends while making QSOs or enjoying a great pileup. Licensed and unlicensed youth, with the help of a licensed operator, will be making QSOs. Everyone is reminded that this could be the first radio contact ever for some newcomers. Help fill their logbooks. Use this direct link to the DX cluster, already filtered, to spot active stations during December YOTA month. DYM Stations 2025, hosted by dxsummit.fi.
Registration is open for a European Space Agency education school project that asks teachers to challenge their students to create computer programs that will run successfully on board the International Space Station. Whether students are beginners or more advanced at coding, there is a place for them in the European AstroPi Challenge. The UK Space Agency and the European Space Agency are offering the challenge to students up to age 19 with different levels of coding competency. Beginners are invited to participate in the AstroPi Mission Zero by designing a piece of pixel art for display to astronauts aboard the ISS on Raspberry Pi computers known as AstroPis. Students capable of handling more complex code, in this case programming in Python, are asked to be part of the Mission Space Lab instead. Their challenge is to calculate the speed of the ISS by utilizing sensors or a camera with the AstroPi. Mission Zero's deadline is the March 23, 2026, and Mission Space Lab deadline is February 16, 2026. Resources are being provided to the educators by the project. AstroPi's ambassador is European Space Agency astronaut Sophie Adenauer, KJ5LTN, who will be undertaking her first mission to the ISS in early 2026.
A ham radio club in West Bengal, India, best known for its special skill in helping reunite family members who are lost, sometimes for years, has once again made use of its robust network on behalf of a woman who'd gone missing 2 decades ago. An older woman believed to have been begging on the streets of Bangladesh for survival for years has reconnected with her family in India through the efforts of the West Bengal Radio Club, an organization with a specialty in missing persons cases. The woman's disappearance was traced to a religious pilgrimage she made nearly 20 years ago, an annual gathering near the Ganges River. With the volume of pilgrims at the event, known as the Gangasagar Mela, it is not uncommon for many attendees to get lost or to go missing. According to the club's secretary, Ambarishnaj Biswa, Victor Uniform 2, Juliet Foxtrot Alpha, the woman, who is now about 70 years of age and from a village in India, somehow joined a group of pilgrims from Bangladesh. That is how she is believed to have taken a detour to Bangladesh instead of returning home. News accounts said that she was soon living on the street begging. Recently, ham radio contacts in Bangladesh reached out to the West Bengal hams, asking them to intervene after they questioned her, and she uttered one of the few words she could, Sagar, the name of the district she came from in India. Using photographs of her and their wide network of contacts, the West Bengal hams finally reached her surviving family members, according to a report in the Australia India News. She has 2 surviving sons in Delhi. Her husband and 1 son have since died. Attempts at uniting her with her sons are currently underway.
We have 2 silent keys to tell you about this week. First, a treasured friend and life member of the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters has become a silent key. John Walker, ZL3IB, was a prominent editor and author of articles and publications devoted to amateur radio in New Zealand and beyond. He had served as acting editor of the Christchurch Amateur Radio Club newsletter, Hamlarks, and 18 years as editor of Break-In, the official journal of New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters. John received his call sign in 1971. He became a silent key in Christchurch on November the 2nd. When it came to amateur radio, John didn't just believe in operating, he believed in educating, a natural motivation for him because education was his career. He had been a professor of botany at the University of Canterbury in Christchurch. He was a founding trustee of the Radio Science Education Trust in 1998. The trust, which is part of NZART, supports persons wishing to advance their education in radio science. John was also the widely published author of dozens of technical articles and columns on amateur radio and equipment. He was made an honorary life member of NZART in 2014. John was 92. Just 3 weeks shy of his 93rd birthday when he became a silent key. And finally, we also learned of the death of Ganesh Subramaniam, VU2TS, an influential ham in Bangalore and beyond. Ganesh became a silent key on the 2nd of December, reportedly after a brief illness. In online posts on Facebook and websites, many remembered him as an enthusiastic CW operator who embraced the code from the very start. In an October 2019 interview on the QSO Today podcast, he spoke about his enthusiastic radio beginnings as a shortwave listener, culminating in taking his exam in 1960 at a time when amateur radio operators were few and far between in India. He said he did not receive his license, a Grade 1 license, until April of 1965 at the age of 29. He learned that he had just become the 350th ham in India. Always active and enthusiastic, he became the founder and net control operator of the Charminar Net and a life member of the Bangalore Amateur Radio Club. He was also an avid contester and served for a time as editor of Ham Radio News, the Amateur Radio Society of India's magazine. Ganesh was 90. You can hear Ganesh tell his story on the QSO Today podcast by visiting qsotoday.com and type his name in the search bar.
Educators, do you want to send your students' computer programs to space with the European AstroPi Challenge? AstroPi, Mission Zero, and Mission Space Lab are now officially open for the 2025 and 2026 challenge. AstroPi is a European Space Agency education project run in collaboration with the Raspberry Pi Foundation and delivered nationally by the European Space Education Resource Offices. The project offers different levels of complexity. Mission Zero for beginners up to 19 years old to learn to write a simple program that will run in space. Mission Zero, well suited for beginners, offers a chance for young people to create a piece of pixel art and have it displayed for astronauts to see on two special Raspberry Pi computers called AstroPis aboard the International Space Station. The deadline for Mission Zero submissions is March 23, 2026. Mission Space Lab for more experienced coders up to 19 years old to carry out a scientific task using a program that will run in space. For more experienced coders, Mission Space Lab returns with a real-world scientific task, calculating the speed of the ISS as accurately as possible using the AstroPi's sensors or camera. Teams of 2 to 6 young people need to write a Python program that collects data from the AstroPi computers on the ISS to perform this calculation. Every team that submits a program that compiles with the official guidelines will be awarded a participation certificate. The submission deadline for Mission Space Lab is February 16, 2026. The European AstroPi Challenge, or AstroPi for short, is a free educational project. It has 2 missions that young people up to 19 years old can participate in, depending on their programming abilities. Both missions use Python programming to create short computer programs that will be run on the International Space Station. The AstroPi School Project Platform offers educators a comprehensive suite of resources to engage students in space science and coding activities, as well as support and community engagement activities.
And finally this week, what has 5,000 batteries and floats? Well, it sounds like the start of a joke. Ship maker Incat Tasmania isn't kidding around about electric ships. Hull 096 has started charging, although it has only 85% of its over 5,000 lithium-ion batteries it will have when it's completed. The ship has a 40 megawatt-hour storage system with 12 banks of batteries, each consisting of 418 modules, for a total of 5,016 cells. The ship is 130 meters long, mostly aluminum, and has a reported capacity of 2,100 people and 225 vehicles per ferry trip. Ferry service is perfect for electric ships. The distance is short, and it's easy to schedule time to charge. Like all electric vehicles, though, the batteries won't stay at full capacity for long. Typical ship designs call for a 20-year service life, and it's not uncommon for a vessel to remain in service for 30 or even 40 years. But experts expect the batteries on the ferry will need to be replaced every 5 to 10 years.
This Week in Amateur Radio is holding open auditions for news anchors for the weekly national worldwide amateur radio news service. If you have a good radio voice and can reliably read provided news copy, we are looking for you. This, of course, is an all-volunteer position. An amateur radio license is not required. You must have a high-quality microphone. Headset mics are not used. And Be familiar with audio editing software to record and edit your finished news stories before uploading. If you would like to try out for a weekly or bi-weekly anchor position with North America's premier amateur radio news on air and podcast, please send an email to our producer, George, W2XBS. You can include a sample MP3 of yourself reading news copies sent as an attachment to W2XBS77@gmail.com. That's whiskey, the number 2, X-ray Bravo Sierra 77@gmail.com. Be sure and use Anchor Audition in the subject line. Please include your phone number and a good window of time for a callback to discuss your submission and our operating logistics to see if This Week in Amateur Radio is a good fit for you. We hope to hear from you soon. This Week in Amateur Radio is heard around the country and around the world on great repeater systems like the CQ0 UTRZ repeater on 439.175 MHz in Sierra Aristal in Portugal, covering Porto to Lira. Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air, and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you'd like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and our news team around the world, this is Chris Perrine, KB2FAF, wishing you a 73.